everybody. It's fantastic to see you here. I'd like to welcome you to What It Takes to Enter the Job Market. This is the final event of this academic year in the What It Takes Alumni Event Series, organised by our Alumni Relations team, who are around today, and I'm sure you can see them later and speak to them as well. I'm going to do a few introductions and tell you a little bit about the format of this event. So I'm Tracy Wells. I know some of you in the room already, which is fantastic, but I am the Careers and Employability Service Manager at the University of Westminster. I've been at Westminster about 3 years, and in fact the last time I was involved in a What It Takes event was just before we went into COVID lockdown, so I'm rather hoping that's not an omen for this evening. So I'm really happy that you've made the time to come along for this event. It's a subject completely close to my heart because we're talking about employment and employability. And so the format of the event is as follows. So we are recording. So the recording will be available on the Alumni YouTube channel in the near future. So just wanted to let you know that in case you have to leave early or something like that. And if any of you are observing Ramadan at the moment, please feel free to leave when you need to. That's obviously absolutely fine. And there are prayer rooms and a contemplation room here in the basement of this building. So the refreshments will be available to all guests from sunset. So I just wanted to let you know that. So the structure of this event, our panel will discuss their career journeys after graduation and the lessons they've learned along the way. So I'm really happy that they're going to be sharing that with you. And there will be an opportunity to ask questions of the panellists at the end. And there will also be members of the team with roaming microphones, which means that you will be able to ask a question and you can be heard by everybody else in the room. So that's great. And we are using Slido, which I don't know if you've used that before, but it's a way of asking questions online. So you can ask your questions anonymously. But you need to put in that code, WIT 8658, so you'll find the correct Slido page and you can ask your questions on that. And this will be followed by a networking session with refreshments. So I hope that all sounds like a great way to spend your Tuesday evening. So I am going to introduce the panel. So I'm going to do it in alphabetical order, which isn't the order in which they're sat. So first of all, we have Sam Bagpot. Just want to give a wave, say hello.
Hi.
That's brilliant. And then we have Monique Noel Brown. And then we have Irina Gervais.
Hi.
And then we have Abdul Rahman Ibrahim.
Hi there.
And then we have Tahar Kawan.
Yes, hi.
Great. And so I'm going to now ask each of those panel members in that order to give just a brief overview of their careers and journeys from studying at Westminster until now. So we're going to start with Sam.
Hi everyone. So I studied marketing communications at Westminster Business School, class of 2020. I'm a social media and content strategist at Havas now. So we are like a creative agency group. I started off, I was actually a talent bank student, so I was working for the University of Westminster from the beginning of my final year, and I worked there straight through graduation. From there, I ended up working at a market research agency, which is so funny to me because my least favourite module known to man was market research, so funny how it worked out. And I was there for just over a year. Great fun, really great learning opportunity before transitioning over to a junior role at Havas, and that was about 2 years ago now. So yeah, I've been there since then, and that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Sam. So now Monique.
Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm Monique. So I do EMEA, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa PR at AWS, with a focus on UK and IPR, sustainability, infrastructure, and technology. So I studied Spanish and global communication. I can't really remember when I graduated because COVID and my memory just completely, I think it was 2021, let's just say that. Like Sam, I worked with the talent bank in my final year, so I was an administrator for the language volunteer scheme. I'd done that for a couple of months, and then I was a social media officer for Westminster Business School, so sort of helping up set up their sort of social media pages. And with that experience, I then joined the Taylor Bennett Foundation. So what they are is they're an agency that help people from ethnic majority backgrounds get into PR. They offer like several courses, finance ones that you can sort of enter if you want to go into sort of finance PR, but they also offer a summer star scheme, and that's the scheme that I went with. And what they offer is basically sort of like blind job descriptions. So you'll get job descriptions sent to your email, you don't know the business, you don't know the brand, you apply, you do the first interview with the Taylor Bennett Foundation, and then the second interview with the surprise employer. I was lucky enough to be matched with BT, so I did an internship with BT Enterprise and internal comms for about 4 months. I then got promoted to an internal comms specialist role at BT Consumer, which I did for 6 months, and once my contract ended, I went back to the agency, again through the Summer Star scheme, and applied for the role at AWS, which I'm currently in now for about 7 or 8 months. And that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Monique. And Monique has very kindly shared details of the Taylor Bennett Foundation, so you will all get those in the follow-up email, so that's brilliant, thank you. And then Irina.
Hi everybody, I'm Irina and I studied PR and advertising in the Harrow campus, graduated in 2019. As opposed to my colleagues, I was not involved in Talent, but I did some other volunteering work when I was in university. So I was involved in different PRC career affairs events, and I also volunteered as an English teacher for North Korean refugees in London. So I think those skills sort of like helped massively throughout my career journey. In my second year of university, I managed to secure a PR internship at an integrated agency in London, working across different clients such as Weetabix, Petco, P&G. And then later on, once I graduated, I managed to get a job in the WPP. And for those who are, sort of like exposed to PR and advertising, it's one of the leading groups, where I was a European content manager, and I worked for 2 different clients. So I worked for Ford Motor Company as well as Nespresso. And as of 1st of March this year, I changed my job and I started a new role for a marketing and advertising company called ICP, and it stands for Incredible Capable People, and I am a senior content manager.
Thank you very much, Irina. And then we have Abdul.
Thank you. So I've done a lot of jobs, so I would be here all day if I was to tell you every job I've done at university. I think I've done probably around 13 part-time jobs, but we won't go into all of them. So I think let's start from talent bank. So I'm actually another talent bank student. I took part in what was used to be called the 125 Fund, and I was a student coordinator on that. I worked at the SU as well for a bit, in part of the events team and sort of dealing with events and running events within the SU. Outside of university, I've done a couple of part-time jobs. I started off just before COVID, actually. I remember that being my first work from home job at a startup AI company called Clio, where I was dealing with the operations team and I was helping them improve the customer flow and just sort of answering customer queries and all sorts. And then was made redundant because of COVID and then moved over to a mortgage broker where I was dealing with the operation team as well, helping customers with their mortgage applications and sort of easing the process with that. And then after that was a short contract, and afterwards I then moved over to Utility Warehouse, which is an energy company, and I worked at the energy energy company for over a year, doing sort of, again, customer operations, especially during the energy crisis that we had last year. So it was very sort of hectic and sort of trying to ease customers and all sorts. And then, well, I didn't even tell you guys what I graduated with, sorry. So I completed a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in cybersecurity, and then once I was in my master's, I was applying for graduate jobs, and I got a graduate job at Aon in their cybersecurity division, which I'm currently doing. So when I graduated in September, I joined Aon, and I've been with them for the last seven months. And yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Taha.
Yes. Hi, nice to meet you. I work at Citi, the investment bank. I've been there for around a year now, and before that I spent around 4 years in fintech doing credit, risk, but also strategy, which is what I do now at Citi. Prior to that, I was at the Royal Bank of Canada doing equity research for a very short period of time, and before which I was kind of at uni from 2014 to 2017 at the business school studying finance. I also did a master's degree at Imperial College before starting work, but that's the career in a nutshell.
Thank you very much. So I've got a series of questions that I'm going to put to the panel. So we'll start with Sam, and we'll start with the first question and just work through the panel. So Sam, how did your experience at Westminster help you decide on your career direction or securing a job?
So, good question. I think the main thing for me, I did not go to university straight out of school, so I came to university when I was 20, I was just about to turn 21. And I think the big thing for me was feeling like I've got some kind of decision or consensus when I left as to what I was going to do afterwards. I was like, I cannot come all this way, not from London, I was like, I cannot come all this way and not know what it is or have narrowed down what it is that I want to spend my time doing afterwards. So the good thing for me, specifically with Westminster, is that I felt like I got to dip my toe into a lot of different things, and it's not always just about deciding what it is that you do want to do, it's also about deciding what you don't want to do, which is a really big thing, because sometimes I find it very overwhelming when there's so many options. It can be almost equally as frustrating as if there were none, because you still don't know where to look. So I think for me, Westminster just helped me kind of refine my options, and that's what inadvertently guided me towards what I did want to end up doing, which is more towards like content, brand strategy, and social, and that's ultimately what led me to now. Yeah, and that was through a number of things. We spoke about this earlier. A few of us on this panel are Westminster Working Cultures participants, so for those of you that know what that is, kudos to you. Those of you who don't, check it out. It's ultimately a program, I won't go into too much detail, but you get to go and meet people who've graduated and moved overseas. So they do trips now to Singapore, Washington DC was mine, they do trips to Berlin, fully funded at the moment, I believe, by Santander University's fund. But we got to meet people who studied all different kinds of courses and who'd taken their degree into so many different places. It was really good, it gave you a really good steer, I felt, because that image of a really good graduate in my mind back then was someone who, did a grad scheme. You have that very linear thought process of what good looks like. But then when you met people who've started their own company, or who've now worked for an NGO, or who work for a creative agency, it broadens your view so much. So yeah, that's what I say.
Thank you. It sounds like you had a very rich experience at Westminster. So Abdul, the same question to you.
Thank you. So with my experience, I would say it's pretty much similar. I'd say, I think first year was maybe quiet for me. I didn't really do much first year, but second year, the first thing I'd done was take part in that Washington working culture trip, which sort of opened the door to a lot of things and it opened my doors to sort of my experience at the university. When I came back, what did I do afterwards? I sort of straight into that student caller job where I was able to sort of call sort of alumni and speak to them, sort of ask them questions about their jobs, what they've been up to, and sort of ask questions that I could sort of find out more about the industry. I then moved over to sort of working in the student union, and sort of working within the student union, working with other students to sort of try to improve their student experience as well, which led to me sort of opening my own sort of travel society at the university, and I worked sort of tirelessly. I mean, COVID did come in. I opened the society 3 days before COVID, so it didn't mean I couldn't do much travel, but once COVID went, we started the society up and it was really successful. And pretty much every opportunity that I had at the university, I pretty much said yes to it. So I think one thing that Westminster taught me was to sort of say yes to opportunities, because with every opportunity you get so many rewards from it. You may not know every reward that you get from it, but maybe 5 years time you'll be like, oh, I remember when I done that, that sort of gave me that skill that I can do sort of now. So I think Westminster definitely taught me to say yes to a lot of things, and by doing all these activities I was able to use the skills and use those experiences to go into job interviews and sort of tell them, hey, like when I was in DC, I spoke to them and I done this, or when I was working at that part-time job, I helped customers through the energy crisis where they were calling and they were shouting at me, but I was able to calm them down, yada, yada, yada. So I think by doing so many of these different experiences at the university, I was able to then transfer it into my job interviews and sort of tell them, hey, this is me, this is the experiences I have, and this is what I can bring to that company. And I feel like Westminster definitely aided me in doing that by having all these opportunities, such as like today, for example, and sort of, yeah, giving me that experience and that hope that I can use in job interviews and securing a job. But yeah, that's pretty much me, thank you.
Thank you very much, Abdul. Irina.
Yes, I guess for me it was a similar experience that Sam had as well. So I've also taken a gap year after high school. I had no idea what I'm doing or what I want to do, and I want you to know that it's fine. You don't have to have it figured out. And so I decided I want to study PR and advertising on a whim. I really liked watching Coca-Cola ads when I was a kid in front of the TV. And so I guess in the way in which Westminster helped me in a similar way to Sam, I went to the Westminster Walking Culture Abroad scheme in Hong Kong back in 2019. And it really helped me in a way because I get to interact with different students that work across different industries, as well as visiting different companies in Hong Kong. And as you probably all know, Hong Kong is a very metropolitan city, so they have very big global clients as well. So again, that probably increased my interpersonal skills quite a lot, and it sort of like opened new doors for me. But in terms of the course itself, I can honestly say that in advertising you have different areas that you can focus in. So you have creativity, you can be either a creative art director, you can be a copywriter, you can be a strategist, you can work in media planning. There are so many ways and the areas that you can focus on. And I guess for us, it was great that we had a lot of agency open days where we would get a chance to go to different agencies and see their work. And that sort of was some sort of inspiration for us to focus on the areas that we liked. And on top of that, LinkedIn Learning was really good. There are so many areas that are covered there and so many qualifications and certificates that you can get in order to add on your CVs and learn about what you like and what you want to try in the future. So I guess Westminster really paved the way for me from that perspective when starting my career journey.
Thank you very much, Irina. And for those of you who are current students, you've got access to LinkedIn Learning for free, so do check it out if you haven't already. Monique.
Yeah, so I guess my experience is very much similar to everyone else's. I also did the Westminster Working Culture, but actually when I first joined Westminster in 2017, I originally did linguistics in Spanish, and I did linguistics off a whim because I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do. And I'll be very honest, I hated it. It was really bad, I didn't enjoy it, and I kind of got to a point where I was speaking to my course leader and I was like, I want to change. She was like, you can either do English literature in Spanish or global comms in Spanish, and I was like, I'm done with English literature, I've done that for 7 years, I'm not doing it again. So I had no idea what global comms was, what it was about, and I just sort of took the chance to take part in that course, and I ended up really enjoying it. But what Westminster really helped me with sort of shaping my career in PR is the sort of the careers team. So one thing I did was booking some time in to speak to a careers advisor and just basically saying what can I do with global comms? What is out there? What sort of career prospects are there within this industry? And he referred me actually to Prospects, which I think is a tool that they advise you to use with the careers advisors. I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah. Prospects,
I haven't used it in ages. So he basically advised me to just sort of go on Prospects, type in public relations, and have a look at different types of roles there are, pick the top 3, and then just, you know, just have a go. I guess like sort of straying away from the question a little bit is that you don't need to be too set in the sort of career path that you want to do. Like doing things like internships is a great way to sort of test and trial. So yeah, speaking to careers advisors about what I can do with public relations really helped me, and also like, you know, the rest of the panelists getting involved with the Students' Union, Westminster Working Cultures, like that stuff really did help to sort of boost connections, networking, it helped me a lot as well with sort of building that professional profile on LinkedIn, which is very, very important with sort of networking and reaching out to employers in sort of today's generation. So I would definitely say like utilize the careers team to your maximum, ask as many questions as you can possible, because for me, that's basically what made me want to get into PR and explore the route of where I am today.
That's great, thanks Malik. And Taha?
Yes, I think the panel has been very comprehensive. I don't want to kind of reiterate everything they've said. I've ran a society, I've networked, I've worked part-time, worked in Westminster Business Consultants, etc., etc., etc. But I think what we're all trying to get at is saying that it's not the specific thing that matters, it's the attitude that you have every day over the 3-year period that you spend here. It's like, you know, how are you kind of, what's your attitude like? Are you kind of interested in things and you're pursuing them, which is what you should be doing? Are you kind of working on your CV, trying different things, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter whether it's this or that or a society or a part-time job, as long as I think the attitude is there and the hunger to learn, the curiosity, the willingness to kind of, you know, learn more, put in the effort, try things, because it's really the only 3-year period in your life probably that you'll be able to try things without kind of much risk, really. So, you know, taking that time helped me a lot. I think it's really, to be honest, it's really hard to measure how these activities actually contributed to me getting a job. I think probably didn't help me that much, but I think it's the attitude that helped me. I don't think that the specific kind of items I have in my CV or the cool society names or the networking events I attended have helped me at all. But it's the attitude and that I took throughout the journey. So when I reached that kind of job offer interview, you know, I had spent 3 years of kind of exploring myself, exploring different avenues, and understanding what is it that I like, and also building that discipline and a little bit of good habits along the way. So I think that would be my key takeaway from kind of how you should spend your time.
Thank you. We've had some great advice already from the panel. So I'm going to start with Taha with the next question. So what was the hiring process like for your job and any others you've applied for? And what are some of the main skills that you think employers are currently looking for?
Yes, so I graduated quite a long time ago, 2017. I think the process is still similar. You know, I don't know where you guys are applying for and what kind of industries, but generally there's an application form, there's a CV, there's potentially a cover letter as well that has to be a little bit tailored, you know, to the extent that they can feel that you pretended to tailor it at least. But the main thing, it has to have the company name on it as opposed to a different company name. This is just from my experience. I can see some people not agreeing with what I say. Cover letters weren't very useful or important in my graduate jobs. What people cared about was mainly the CV and then the psychometric tests. So there was a numerical, verbal, logical psychometric test. So whether you had a cover letter or not, it didn't really matter. You needed to pass the test. And someone had to pick your CV. So if you knew someone, that's a huge plus, but that's generally quite difficult. You had to pass the tests, they had to like your CV, and then if you managed to get a first round interview, which is usually a phone interview, then you really have kind of gone past 99% of other applicants who would never be with that. So getting that first phone interview is a really good sign. It means they kind of initially liked your CV and liked the results of your test. And then it's really up to you. It's not up to the name of the university you've been to or what's written on your CV or whatever else, or where you're from, or your colour. It's really up to you on the phone interview or the first face-to-face interview to actually perform. So there will be a list of questions, whether competency-based, i.e. relating to your field, or motivational, which is more kind of why do you want to work for us, where do you see yourself in 5 years, and that kind of questions. So you have these two different types of interview questions, and there's a third which is technical, but generally it's either motivational or competency. And then you need to prepare for these types of questions, and you need to give your best answer, even if you feel like some of the questions are a bit, why do you want to work for us? Every bank or every company is going to ask you that, but you need to kind of show them that you've put a bit of effort. So I think that was the process in a nutshell. An application form, maybe a bit of tests after sending the CV, and then if they like that, they call you up or invite you for a video interview. And then the next or final stage usually is a combination of assessment center at the employer's offices, along with multiple rounds of interviews with senior and junior hired, junior employees at the firm. So it's quite an extensive process of like 4 to 6 stages. But yeah, that's what it's like. What was the second part of the question?
Yeah, so what are some of the main skills you think employers are currently looking for?
Yes, good question. I think it's exactly the same type of skills that employers were looking for 10 years ago, probably, for the most part. If you put tech aside, I think generally what employers are looking for is just, especially from a grad, is work ethic, having a good attitude. That's the most important thing, because you have nothing else to offer, generally speaking. As a graduate, at least again in my experience, some of you might have had 5 years experience before studying, or a lot of part-time experience related to the role that you're applying to. But as a graduate with no experience, you don't have a lot to offer besides having a really good attitude, showing up, showing that you are keen to help and keen to solve problems. That is the main takeaway. And then besides that, if you have a bit of kind of technical skills on the side that are related to your degree or the job you're applying for and doing, then that's a good addition and a good plus for sure. But I think sometimes, at least me when I was a student, I always thought it's going to be the really complicated skill sets and modeling and technical stuff and coding and writing amazing kind of essays that would be the main important skill that an employer is looking for. But actually I realized after 5 years of working now is that it's really the little things that no one else wants to do. Like solving the problems, fixing things up, showing initiative and being proactive in offering your colleagues or your boss to kind of take on some more work, doing the tedious stuff that no one wants to do, but people will definitely appreciate it because everyone knows it's tedious. So it's really this kind of stuff that sets people apart, the attitude. It's not really whether you're smart or whether your degree is cool or not. That's what I would say is the main skill set.
Letters are important. And I would say this because in the sense of my hiring process in PR, you're going to do something like PR, marketing, advertising, anything that requires a basic level of communication. Cover letters really do show your employer your level of communication. If you send a cover letter that has grammatical errors, there's no commas, there's like miscapitalization, that shows your level of communication and your writing skills. So when you do submit a cover letter and you do submit one that's structured well, that really sort of deep dives into your experience that you don't necessarily see on your CV, it does show your employer, one, that you've taken the time, enough time to sort of present this cover letter for this role, but also that you have those sort of excellent communication skills that everybody puts on their CV. So for me, in terms of the hiring process, is that it's usually 1 to 3 stages. I think it really does depend on the field that you're in. For PR, for me, it's been 1 to 3 stages. So for agency role that I had interviewed for beforehand, it was sort of the first role with an account director, and then the second stage was like an activity. The activity was responding to an email and also something, I can't remember, PR related in terms of sort of picking out certain information and then collating that into sort of like data. And then the third stage interview was with the CEOs of the business. So it was quite a small agency that I did this interview with, so it can vary depending on the size. So my role at ET and at Amazon Web Services was through the Taylor Bennett Foundation. So those were two-stage interviews. So the first stage was with the agency, and it was very, very informal. It was a case of them asking me about my passions for PR, what I want to do, why I want to work in sort of technology, sort of areas on that, and then my interview sort of moving on with like BT and AWS was very similar. It was your standard questions like, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, why do you want to work here, etc. But like I said, this can vary. So my role at AWS is currently a contract role, which is why it was two stages and it's through agency. However, if you were to apply for a role directly through AWS, it would be 6 stages. It's something that we call a loop. So essentially, you have to have 3 to 4 examples, sort of work examples of our like leadership principles, which I'll give an example. One of them is like learn and be curious, which means to like be innovative with the ideas that you bring into the business, and you have to give those ideas for 6 stages. So it really does vary. One of the great pieces of advice I've been given at AWS is that you can always do like an introductory call before an interview, just to scope out what the stage is going to be like with the employer, what the interview process will be like, a bit more about the role. That's also a great way to sort of make your face sort of more prominent and make the employer remember you more because you've taken the time out to actually be like, hey, can we connect for 5 minutes before this interview? So yeah, it really does vary. I would say in terms of main skills, I'm a bit biased because I work in tech, but technology and having basic tech skills is very important. So simple use of things like Microsoft and PowerPoint and being able to navigate things like Outlook and Slack and social media channels. Like social media right now is currently booming and a lot of businesses are trying to incorporate social media more into their strategy. So having a good knowledge of that, or even the willingness to want to develop your basic knowledge into something, you know, more prominent is a great skill to have. I think very similar to what you were saying about having passion and having drive. That is very like, you want to, when you go in an interview, you want to be passionate about what you're speaking about. People can tell when you're not interested in the role and you're just kind of there for like the money, which I mean we all are, but you've got to have some type of passion and a drive to sort of really hook your employer. Like I said, good communication skills, that's definitely a must as well. A lot of times you'll find when you go into the working world is that at university you're given a question and it's like, expand this question in the most descriptive way in 6,000 words, whereas in the working world it's I need you to explain this to me in 5 minutes or that's it. So having those good communication skills really does help in just everyday life, in everyday working life. And the final piece of advice I would say is that honesty is the best policy. If somebody asks you a question, you don't have the skills, you don't know the answer, just be honest. Be like, you know, I don't have these skills at the moment, I'm not too sure, but it's something that I'm willing to work on, it's something that I'm willing to develop. Employers want people who want to learn, who want to grow, so don't be afraid to say that, you know, you don't know this or you don't have that skill because you can always learn it later down the line.
Thanks, Monique. And then
one last thing, she's reminding me actually, attention to detail. Yeah, I forgot to mention the CV and the cover letter. Yeah, of course, like it goes without saying, any mistake is just, you know, you're out. No one knows spelling mistakes. So attention to detail is probably the second for me after the attitude.
Great, we'll take that away. Thank you. And Irina?
Yeah, so my whole hiring process was entirely different compared to my colleagues. When I was still studying, so throughout the 3 years of my course, I was waitressing at an Italian restaurant. And so on my second year of university, I was looking for a summer internship. And so one of the locals there happened to be working in marketing. And so I briefly mentioned to him that I'm a student, I'm very motivated, I'm very keen to start my career journey, and etc. And then he helped me secure an interview with a company that he was collaborating with. And so I got the chance to go on an interview, and as my colleague said, you normally, when you're a student and you don't even have a finished degree, you don't have much to offer, but enthusiasm and being curious and having the right attitude. And so I only had one interview there, and I managed to secure the job, and I worked there for about 3 months. And now this is where it gets really interesting. So once I graduated, I was looking for my first sort of like real full-time job in advertising. And then again, I went to a barbecue, and I met somebody that happened to work for one of the companies that I really wanted to work for, which is WPP. And again, she helped me get a job interview at, back then it used to be called GTV, and it was for Ford Motor Company as a European content manager. But the reason why I'm telling you this, and don't worry, I'm not telling you to go out there and find friends that organize barbecues, that's not the point. The point is, whoever you're speaking with, and the events that you're going with, and the people that you're networking with, you have to be, very curious and have to be enthusiastic about this. And just make it clear that you're looking for your next career opportunity, and that, focus on the area that you want to work in. And to really sum it up, I started a new role a month ago, and I panicked because I have no interview experience. I don't know how to apply to jobs because I was only networking. This is how I used to get jobs in the past. And I went into a panic mode because I had to change my job, and I thought, oh, I'm stuck in this job forever now because I don't know how to apply to jobs. But in reality, you just really start from scratch, and I think LinkedIn should really be your best friend moving forward and from now on. And you just really go on LinkedIn, apply to jobs, and it's really a learning curve. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And then I personally didn't have to, have much cover letters and, really be thorough on the writing, but I guess it depends from case to case. And the take from my perspective when it comes to what they're looking for when they're hiring, students or and for entry-level positions is that even though you don't have experience, you can get some other skills or certificates. For example, a few months ago, I did an improv course, and nobody asked me to do an improv course. I just did it because I thought it's a way of getting better at communicating with people and making presentations. And so when I got this role with my current company, ICP, my manager actually confessed to me that the reason why I got the job was because I was really good at communicating and presenting. And so it doesn't necessarily have to, be transcribed into certifications and what you did and where you volunteered, but it's really like the soft skills to get out of it. And I guess a good tip from my point of view and what helped me secure jobs in general is before you jump on an interview with the hiring team, make sure to check them on LinkedIn and to see their experience, because I've done that a couple of times and sort of like walled the entire hiring team. They're like, oh, we were not expecting you to go on LinkedIn and see, our previous work experience. So I guess that shows how interested you are in the position, how interested you are in the company, and again, it goes with the background checks, go to see what they've been doing, the work they've been having recently. And I guess that helps a lot, just to let them know that you're really out and about and you're very interested in working with them, I guess. But yeah, that was my experience for me, and I know it's slightly different from what my colleagues previously said, but it's really networking as well. So I guess the reason why we're here as well today is to have networking with you and to, potentially help you in the future secure a job, or if you have any extra questions,
Teach me how to network.
If you want to, sure. I mean, yeah, so the reason why we're here today is really for you to ask those questions, and I'm probably sure Sam will cover this later, but there are also referrals that we can help you with at a point. I don't know if there are a lot of advertising or marketing students here, but yeah, this is something we can help on our end later. Good luck.
That's brilliant, thank you. It's some great advice on networking there. I think we've all got something to learn. Thank you. And Abdul.
Thank you. Taha really said a lot of the things I was going to say for the hiring process, so I won't bore you again and say the same thing. Especially as a graduate and someone in a graduate job, the process is really similar. It's pretty much, I felt like it was like a full-time job, just sort of applying for jobs, going through the online tests, still failing, then going another one, repeat, spent a long time doing it. But I think overall, there are a couple of things I could take away from sort of spending maybe, I don't know, a lot of hours doing it, is that a lot of times they look for your soft skills. I think, especially as a graduate job, a lot of times they can teach you the technical stuff, they can teach you how to do your job, they can teach you the processes they do, but they can't really teach you how to talk or how to sit in a meeting room and sort of present or how to work in a team. And I think a lot of times if you have those skills from sort of taking part in experiences and all that, that's pretty much mostly what they're looking for. I mean, you do need to have some sort of technical or some sort of experience and knowledge of what you're looking to go into, but I do think majority of the time, especially in a graduate job, it's basically what soft skills you have and what they can do with that, because a lot of times that's pretty much what they look for. And I think when I say soft skills, I'm talking about that team working, communication, presenting, and so on. And I think overall, those will be the biggest sort of things I would say is needed when sort of in the hiring process. And if you have those sort of skills, I think that already pushes you into that sort of, it makes you stand out. I think especially in interviews, it's important to sort of stand out, and standing out sort of, especially for example, a lot of times with graduate jobs, you may have 10,000 applications. I know for like my job, there was around 12,000 applications, so there's a big group of people applying. So imagine all of you in this room was applying for that one job and they only had that one spot available. You just always have to make sure you can stand out, and you only have maybe that one interview or that one phone interview to make yourself stand out. So like sort of maybe connecting with the hiring manager before you apply, sort of speaking to them, making yourself sort of stand out, maybe having that conversation, having those experiences that you can talk about to make yourself stand out, because at the end of the day, it is sort of just a fight, so you do need to basically sort of stand out and just making sure that you have a good enough story, talking about the impact and talking about things that basically tick the box. Because at the end of the day, the hiring manager has a sheet that they're looking at and they're ticking, okay, this person has so and so, this person has that. So just showing all of that and knowing how to basically succeed in the interview is what I think is the hiring process like, and what sort of skills you need. Yeah, that's all I'm thinking.
Brilliant, thank you, Abdul. Sam?
So, in terms of the hiring process to where I'm at now, I mean it's pretty consistent across marketing, advertising, and PR. I would say it's normally between 2 and 3 stages. I mean, for me, it was so the way that Havas works and the way a lot of kind of agency groups work is the initial interview at the first out of the 3 stages was just a bit of a chit chat. I think that's just to kind of gauge team fit. We're in a sector where there are a lot of people doing a lot of different things. So, you know, ultimately that kind of reinforces something that you guys mentioned earlier, is that in today's labour market there are a lot of people who do what you do. So I think one of the big differentiators is like team fit. You know, like what is it like working with you? What's our day-to-day going to look like here with you in this team? So we had a little chat. Then we had a more formalised interview with kind of the more in-depth questions, but also more like, why would you like to work here? Type questions. And then after that, it was more of a formalised presentation-based thing to kind of give me an example of the type of work that I'd be doing in that role. We did like a mock execution of a media schedule, kind of media plan that was specific to me. So that's kind of the recruitment process, and that's also kind of what that looks like across Havas. In terms of the skills that I'd say that a lot of employees are looking for at the moment, I think a lot of really, really, really good points. Something I would hammer home though as well is that, you know, it's been 3, there was a really interesting study about this, especially when it comes to through COVID, right? There are a lot of people who do all of the different specialties in business, right? You are now approaching, I think, the 3rd year of graduates during COVID that have maybe struggled during like hiring freezes and things like that. So there are a lot of people who do all of these specific specialties that you're looking to go into. So it's those soft skills that are the real differentiators, because you might be able to program, you might be able to do a specific specialty, but so can thousands of other people. So they've got to figure out a way to differentiate them. So when it comes to soft skills, a few really good ones that I would just spotlight. One is like tech basics. And I know it sounds really silly, but I don't want to have to be the person telling someone how to use like Teams or Slack or Excel or PowerPoint or stuff like that. It's something that is more of an expectation now, rather than something that is seen as a huge plus. You would expect that people would have that. Next would be confidence. I always say in the private sector, you know, people have to want to work with you and have to be infused by your passion for the work that you do, and I think work ethic is a really important one. I love what I do, even if it's something that's not necessarily that interesting in a specific project. I think there's something to be learned from everything. There is something that you can take from everything that you do to apply in some way, shape or form, and that's down to you to convey that message. So that I say is really important. Communication is really important as well. For example, if I want someone to join my team, I want to be able to work with someone who can tell me if they're not sure about something. I'd much rather they do that than muck it up and then tell me after they weren't too sure. I want to work with people who can tell that story, speak their questions, understand what it is that they're doing, and if they're not sure, they can just say that. So clear, concise communicators. And the other one was just curiosity. Ultimately, we have a kind of linear route, generally speaking, on paper in terms of the work that we do, but the working world is always changing, it's always developing. I think we could all say in some way, shape or form the work that we do on a day-to-day has varied or deviated than what we thought it was when we first joined. So exhibiting that curiosity to understand, learn something new, be a little bit flexible, and it also goes both ways. That's beneficial to the business because they can see that you're going to be flexible to try new things. It's also beneficial to me because I can say that I've done something else. It's something else you've been at, it's another feather in your cap. So yeah, I'd definitely say lean more into soft skills, and also I think generally speaking in the private sector, it's not if people don't want to work with you, they just won't. So I think it's just a case of conveying that passion, that excitement, and yeah, drawing from your own experiences, because like I said, there's no one is completely unqualified for anything. There's always something you can take and draw from in some way, shape or form.
That's great, thank you. And I encourage curiosity at all times in life. I think it's brilliant advice that's coming there from the panel. So I'm going to change tack slightly and ask a little bit about career choice. And do you have any advice on deciding on a career path and finding the right role for you? And I think we'll start with Sam.
In terms of career path and finding the right role for me, I think I would separate job function and so a couple of things. One, I would separate job function and sector, and I think that goes for a lot of different roles, because especially within, this is very specific to PR and advertising, but I think is applicable in a lot of different sectors as well. I love working in advertising and marketing, but I can do that in a lot of different sectors. I can do that from an agency perspective, I can do that from a client in-house perspective, I can go do that in financial services, I can do that at consumer goods. It has a lot of applications. So one I would say is don't box yourself in, but also use the time at university to kind of sample things and try things out. For me, a great way to do that whilst I was at uni, for those of you that are current students, is I worked with the Students' Union. I wanted to get more connections with industry, and I didn't feel like that's something I had initially when I first started, early days. So we founded a society called Westminster Marketing Society, and the whole point was literally just to get speakers in from places that we wanted to work, and we put in a room where we could just bounce off of each other, you know, have those discussions. We did everything from panel discussions like this, we had like speed dating type things where you'd ring a bell and everyone had to stand up and move to the next table. But the idea was just to kind of understand people's journeys, and I think that allowed us to kind of check things off that we didn't want to do as much as we did want to do. And some of those things you may not have even realised or considered yet. So that kind of led me to that. So I'd say that's what led me to my decision and how I would kind of weigh that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Abdul.
That's a good question. I think the first thing to always say is do what you enjoy. I'd say always, me personally, I've always said if it's the day that I stop enjoying cybersecurity, that's the day I will leave cybersecurity. I definitely think, because this is life, you need to enjoy what you're doing. It will get very boring. And I think the best way of doing it, especially if you're a student in that second year or first year, you've got sort of spring week where you can do sort of internships and work experiences. Not even work, you could even do volunteering, to be honest. Like, there's a lot of different ways you can sort of test out what you want to go into to see if that's really something that you want to do. If that's not possible, maybe sort of speaking to people in the industry that you're interested in or in the field that you're looking to go into, and sort of asking them questions to sort of help you see if that's something that you see yourself doing. And I think those are the two sort of biggest things that I would recommend sort of doing in terms of knowing if that's something that you want to go into. And as always, I'd say, I think the biggest thing if this answer would be always do something that you enjoy doing. There's no point doing something that you don't enjoy because that's not life. But yeah, that's my answer.
Just to add to that, that's a very good point. I think a lot of people kind of psych themselves out and freak themselves out a little bit in the sense that if I'm going to do this, I need to be able to enjoy this for a long time. Can I see myself doing this for a long time? On average, I think the majority of people, this might be slightly off, but I think they change career between 4 and 7 times in their lifetime. You know, whether that be changing, you could be changing within the same company into a different job function. That's a great opportunity to do that. But whilst it is important to have a good idea in terms of the general direction you want to go into, do not psych yourself out, because that learning never stops and you will always develop and try new things and learn and evolve. So yeah, absolutely don't. If there becomes a time where you stop enjoying what it is that you're doing, that may well be a good identifier that you might want to try something else. But there are opportunities to do that. It's not necessarily just a drop and that was a complete waste of my time, because it may not be. So yeah, great one.
Really good advice there. Yes, and thank you. Irina.
Yeah, so for me, I worked actually in different industries a little bit because advertising is such a big spectrum, I would say. So I worked in PR, I worked in advertising localization, and now ICP, the company that I'm with, it's more inclined towards marketing and advertising. So I did change a little bit, and I guess the advice that I can give to you and sort of like help me throughout the years is just try it out and see if you like it. Because obviously you get a job description, you get the responsibilities as well, but there's really no way of knowing until you actually try it yourself and see if you like it. And so that's one of the key advice I would give you. And I guess on top of what Sam already mentioned, it's the fact that you sort of have to decide roughly what's going on within your industry. And by that, I mean, what are the roles available? Is there a specific role? Are you focusing on project management? So you're involved in generating projects and managing projects, or are you involved on the account management? And that is in relation to the clients. Because easily, if you would later on like to change your job, you can do that easily. Not easily, but it would be easier to do it within different industry. So for example, if you're an account manager and you want to switch from, let's say, advertising to tech, it will still be possible because you have the experience of working with clients. Or if you do that in project management, it's quite a similar experience. So I guess from my point of view and what helped me for all the years is going out there and checking out the job descriptions and sort of like forming an idea of what are the requirements. And then have a plan of the companies that you would like to work for as well. Like having them researched and having them narrowed down as well. And I know it sounds cheesy, but I do believe in the law of attraction. This is how I found to work for the company that I wanted to work for in the past, and it really worked for me. And I guess my colleagues also pretty much highlighted everything else, but from my perspective, that's just my addition, I would say.
One final interjection from me on that point, I promise. But just to say, I think that's a really good point. The recruitment process is very lengthy and very expensive, and it can be just as painful for the company as it is for you guys and graduates and just general applicants for those roles. So what I will say is, if you are spending every day with your team, be open and honest with them in terms of what you want to do and what you want to learn. It's very difficult to replace people, especially if you are in your role irreplaceable. So have those conversations. Look, I love what I'm doing, but I think I'd love to maybe develop and have a bit of a steer towards this part of our business, because I find it really interesting. It's not something I've done before. communicate, have those conversations, and what are the things that you want to do, what do you want to learn. And it's much easier to do that when you're working somewhere than it is when you aren't. And so it's always important to be open and honest with the people around you, with your line managers, with your colleagues. Yeah, great.
Thank you. We're getting some great advice across the panel. So thanks, Irina and Monique.
Yeah, so I guess just 2 points of advice from me in terms of deciding a career path, finding a right role for you, which I have mentioned before, which would be, the first one is just looking on sites like Prospects, doing the research, what can you do with your degree, or doing some research into things that you're interested in general. It doesn't necessarily need to be related to your degree. There are a lot of people who I work with in PR who have like a law degree or a degree in like finance, even though we are all in like tech. So don't feel like you're limited to what you've just studied, because you're not. Like there are so many opportunities out there for you to explore. So I would definitely say, yeah, applications like Prospects are really useful. And just to reiterate, internships. Internships are so important in terms of exploring what you want to do safely, without risk. So in the sense of you don't have to sign like a 1-year contract and then, like for example at BT, it's like 3 months notice. So if you do like an internship, it can be like 4 weeks to a year, but it gives you a chance to really explore different sectors, and for you to sort of choose where you want to be. I found for me, because my first internship was in internal comms, that I did enjoy internal comms, but it wasn't right for me. So when I moved into PR, from having that internship, I kind of knew I made the right choice because I had the experience of internship. I was like, this is great, but it's not for me. Moved into PR and I was like, okay, I like this better. So definitely do test and trial internships. There's online internships as well. Bright Network do great internships, so that's a great way to get sort of like online certifications for getting like in-person internships. But I would definitely reiterate, just to test and trial. You know, that first year, the first like 1 to 2 years after you graduate, it's just for you to explore what you want to do. Try out different fields, and then hopefully find something that, you know, fits and works for you. And that's it.
Thanks very much, Monique. And then Taha.
Yes, keep it brief, I'm running out of time. My very first boss that I ever worked for once told me that the first 5 years of work, you're basically trying to, as Nick said, trial and error, exploring different things. So don't feel bad if in the first 1 to 5 years, or 1 to 6 or 7 years, you still don't know what is it you like. It's very easy for me to come sit here and say, oh, do what you love, do what's in your passion. I've heard this like 1,000 times since I was like 15. But I've never really knew exactly what I wanted. That's the whole point. What do you mean by do what you love, or do what you like? It's a very difficult thing to find, with the exception of very few people, at least in my experience. So it does take some time to find what you like. And as everyone said, try stuff, try different things, do internships, volunteer, whatever opportunity that comes your way that you feel you might be interested in. So it's just a hypothesis that you think you might like it. Just go and try to kind of test that hypothesis. You know, the more hypotheses you test, the more you kind of go through different things that you might not like, and then eventually, okay, I think I'm the type of person that likes this type of job. And eventually, maybe, you know, within 3 years, you figure out what you like as opposed to within 7 years. So that would be my very brief advice.
That's great. Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time and I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance to ask the questions of the panel that they have. So I'm going to ask one final question. It's really just in case you've got any further advice that you would give to somebody who was looking for a job right now, whether they're a current student or a recent graduate. Is there any further advice or tips that you want to give them? I will start with Taha.
Yes, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Attitude is underrated, intelligence is overrated. That would be one.
Nice and brief, thank you.
I guess the biggest thing for me is that choose company culture over everything. You can have a good salary, great perks, but if you have a team that micromanages you, or a place where you don't feel like you belong in terms of diversity and inclusion, or working with people who are the same age as you, you know, any type of sort of category, it's just not worth it. For me, I find with my role, one of the main reasons why I enjoy working at AWS so much is because of my team. I can communicate to my team about things related to work, but also things related to personal life, and that's the type of bond you want to have with your team. These are people who you will spend most of your life with. So it's good to have a good company culture where you feel safe enough to express if you feel discomfort, or if you feel like you're overworked, or if you feel like you want to have a challenge, and then also working with people who are open to hearing your thoughts, hearing your opinions, and giving you a platform. So definitely do ask the right questions in interviews about company culture. Listen to what they say. Ask them what is a day in the life, of their position. What does a team do for like team bonding? Because company culture is what will sort of make or break how long you stay at that company and whether or not you enjoy the job.
Brilliant, thank you. And Irina?
Yeah, I guess from my side, and what I would add is really knowing what you want and what are your priorities. So I guess for you guys, you have to ask yourself, what is it that I really want to get out of it? Do I want to work for a company that has a great work-life balance? Do I want to work for a role that pays a lot of money? Is it important for me to have career progression? Is it important for me to have transparency and have a company that supports me on my personal level as well? So these are the questions that I would ask myself, and then I would go out there and do some research. And I guess from a networking perspective, if you guys are interested on how I network and got my 2 previous roles, feel free to grab me afterwards and I'll tell you all about it. But yeah, that's just my additional advice. I think my other 2 colleagues sort of like sum it up pretty much.
Brilliant, thank you. And Abdul?
Really good points. I think one of them, especially in a graduate point of view, is to sort of stay motivated. I think when I was doing sort of job applying, there was a lot of times where you'd get that rejection email and you'd sort of say, oh damn, what did I do wrong this time? And I think just knowing that if you know you have everything you have in terms of sort of skills, and that you'll be perfect for the job, just continue, because there is always going to be that one job that's going to sort of accept you, and if you just sort of stop at the first hurdle, you won't finish the race. So I'd say just sort of try to jump in front of each hurdle that comes your way, and just try to sort of stay motivated, and just know that the harder you try, the more likely there's something that appears, and I think that'll be my biggest sort of advice, especially for those graduate jobs, because I know for myself that there was a lot of times where I'd just close my laptop or throw it away and be like, oh, I don't want to apply for more jobs. But I think, yeah, just sort of stay motivated, just continue applying, and hopefully something sort of appears from it.
You just need one yes.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Just all you need is that one yes to get what you need.
Really great points, thank you. And Shan?
I guess final bits from me. One, specifically on the point of culture, I think that's really important. Company culture is really important, but also don't be disheartened if it doesn't meet your expectations. Everything you do is a stepping stone onto something else. You might find someone and be like, you know what, this is really not the company culture for me, but you know what, you can say that you've done it. You can be there for long enough and be like, you know what, I've done this, I'm really proud of myself, and if anything, this just makes me more equipped to go and do something else afterwards. So that's one thing I think company culture is really important. 2, I would say milk university for every single thing you can. So even down to, so everything from like the work and cultures programs to going overseas, even down to things like your alumni card. A change of scenery. I was actually working from Regent's campus today because alumni, I've got alumni card, it's free, why not? And it just allows us to network and grow our network. And I think the other thing for me is also networking. It's really, really, really important. I found out the other day that I think there are 7 or 8 other Westminster graduates either side of my graduation year in my building, other agencies under House Group, which is mind-boggling. And we ended up coordinating like a big Westminster visit where loads of students, final years, got to come and just spend a day with us. I talked them through some of the work that I do, so I spend most of my time on like Mars, so like Snickers, M&M's, American Express and Adidas and a few others. So it's nice to get those people and you can meet those people. And I never would have done that if they hadn't networked and reached out. So, you know, everybody around you, whether it's in class, whether it's people who graduate a year above you or year below you, they are a resource for you. So tap into them, see what they're doing, ask them to go out for a coffee, and just see what it is they're up to. They're such a huge resource for you.
That's brilliant. I'm so glad we're recording this because there's such richness in all of the advice. And I'm sure for people who aren't here, they're going to gain a lot from it, and from people who are, we want to listen again because it's so really valuable. Just as a reminder, if you are observing Ramadan, please feel free to leave when you need to. We have got some resources that we're going to share after this session as well. And I think we've got some on the Taylor Bennett Foundation, and we've got the prospects.ac.uk website as well, but we'll put together some other resources, and I'm just going to give a bit of a plug for this as well, which is our career support for graduates. So as Sam said, take advantage of everything the university has to offer. We have had some fantastic questions submitted. We aren't going to get through them all. I want to be perfectly honest with you at this point. We've got such brilliant questions. Some of those are for individual panel members. And if you are able to, what I suggest is if they are for individual panel members, you try and grab them later and have nice conversations with them individually and ask your questions, because there's some great questions on the list in front of me. But I'm going to pick a couple. And then we've also got some roving mics, so if there's anybody who hasn't put their question on the Slido and wants to just ask a question live as an audience member, we'd appreciate that as well. But I'm going to choose one of these questions and put the panel on the spot. So, I think this is a great question, but how do you deal with imposter syndrome and feeling like a fraud or insecure within the role that you have or at work? And I think that's a really great question. I don't know who wants to start answering that rather than just going along the line, but please do.
I can jump in on that ever so slightly. I think something that I really struggled with when I graduated is that I think we spend so much time trying to convince everyone that I promise I'm really good at this and I can do it. And then you actually have to kind of like readjust your mindset. When you are someone who has studied it for a very long time, there are a lot of people who didn't study what you did, and you have to kind of trust and reassure yourself you're actually very qualified and very well educated in the space that you do. If you're someone who's volunteered whilst at university, if you're someone who has had an internship whilst you're at university, I know most people do, you are extremely experienced and well-versed, a lot more than most would be. So I'd say for me, it's just trusting your own ability and also have some confidence in the work that you do. I think for me, as a recent graduate, and it was only like 2.5 years ago, but as a student, if you're doing anything else other than studying, you have that looming guilt that there's something else better that I should be doing with my time. But it's actually, you know, taking a step back and being like, you know what, I've actually worked really hard, and I'm really confident that I can do my job and I can do it really well. So I think it's just taking that moment to sit back and appreciate that actually I don't know who I'm trying to convince, but you know, I know I'm very well qualified and well versed in this, and I think that communicates well to prospective employees. If I myself can confidently say and trust that I know how to do this and I can do it really well, that translates really well. So I hope that was the question. I don't know if that's something.
That's great, thank you.
Yeah, I might jump in because this is something that I struggle with a lot. I guess the easiest way to explain sort of my imposter syndrome is that there are days where I'm like, I know exactly what I'm doing, and then the next day I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know why I've been hired. I don't know what I'm doing. And for me, I would say, like, to Sam's point, I feel like self-reassurance does really help, but it's not as effective for me because I can tell myself, okay, you know, I've got experience, I can do this, but then there'll be a part of my brain that's like, you're lying to yourself. So one thing I find that's really useful is that when I do projects or when I'm working on stuff with my team members is asking for proactive feedback. So if I'm working on sort of like a press release or a briefing book, asking about what was the impact of this work that I did? Was it of high standard? Was it of good quality? Like what could be improved? What was good? And I feel like that really helps me with reassuring me that I can do the job that I do at a high standard, at a high quality, because because I have that sort of physical feedback that I can look back on, you know, like accolades that I can look back on in terms of sort of like career progression and being like, okay, yeah, I can do project management because I got some feedback here. And I feel like that sort of physical reassurance helps me sort of stay in the mindset that, you know, I'm good at what I do and I can do PR.
On that point of getting feedback, that's actually a really good point. I think we generally feel, I know I always did, that by asking someone, you know, actually, you know, do you mind just taking a quick look at this? It always feels like I'm almost admitting defeat a little bit. But that's not actually the case. In a professional setting, people ask to get a fresh pair of eyes on stuff all the time. I know I do. Sometimes you could have just been staring at the same slides for absolutely donkey's years, that you just need to get a fresh perspective, and that is okay. And it is nice because rather than get caught up on your own assessment of your own work, it is nice to get that validation and just sense check that I am doing well and I'm on the right track, so completely agree.
Yeah, so on the processing question, personally I think acknowledging that I'm not okay, I'm feeling that I'm not good enough, I'm not worth this, or I don't feel like I'm qualified enough, or whatever the feeling is, acknowledging it in the first kind of instance is really helpful. Also acknowledging that you might not get an answer to whether you actually are not good enough or good enough immediately, meaning that it might take time to kind of slowly, for like a good feeling to kind of land on your heart. It might take a year, it might take a month, it might take a week or 2 days, depending on the situation. So for me, for example, I felt that once like 5 years ago. I had a very specific situation where I felt shit, and I felt like, you know, it really hurt my confidence. But then I feel what helped me is that I acknowledged it, but also realized that, okay, if I kind of build a muscle that can deal with this kind of situations, whenever I face a challenge or someone challenges me or gives me really harsh feedback, or I fail at something, if I build a muscle through which I can kind of stand back up every time, it would be much easier the next time I feel the imposter syndrome. And that's what kind of really happened and really helped me to kind of go through that mental exercise, but also kind of, more importantly, understanding that you need to show yourself that you're good enough by delivering something at some point. You know, you need to kind of look at something that you've built, whether it's a presentation, a piece of written work, if you're working the kind of the more writing type of role, or if it's a piece of code or a website that you build, whatever it is, build something and feel good about it. That helps mitigate the imposter syndrome at some point.
That's great, thank you. Does anyone want to add to that? I think we've covered that question. I want to see if there's any questions in the audience live. Yes.
Hi, good evening. This is a question to everybody on the panel. As someone who ticks all the boxes of the hiring stage, from the CV to the covering letter, going through multiple rounds of interviews, also applying through networking, and still facing rejections, maybe at some point, either the first stage of the interview or the final stage of the interview. What would you think is lacking, or what advice would you give to overcome that hurdle? Because it just goes back to the same thing where you feel like you're getting an imposter syndrome and you're facing multiple rejections and you don't really know what's wrong with you despite of trying your level best.
So I guess in my personal experience as well, because I got my first two roles through networking and then my current role through applying. With experience, I had experience of roughly 3.5 years, and then I would apply to jobs on LinkedIn. I would only get no's, and I was wondering to myself, what am I doing wrong? I have experience, I'm applying in the same industry. I personally think that my responsibilities so far are aligning with the job responsibilities for the jobs that I'm applying. And so it was personally for me very demotivating to apply to jobs and to keep getting no's, so I completely understand how you feel. However, the advice that I can give you, and it's something that I've done in the past as well, is to reach out to the people that conducted an interview and ask them for feedback. I think that's really important, as Sam previously mentioned. Let's say you got through the first stage or the second stage, and then you only had the last stage that you were supposed to be called in for. Reach out to the hiring team or reach out to the recruiter in question and ask them, what do you think I've done wrong? Oh, it's not something that you've done wrong usually, but it's something that maybe they wanted you to focus on a different area, or they wanted you to focus on a different skill, or they wanted some different parts that you maybe didn't highlight, and just to sort of make this about yourself. Sometimes if you get a no, it's not really about yourself, it's about what they need. And sometimes maybe they're doing you a favor because you weren't the right fit for the role, and then maybe if you got a job, you wouldn't have liked it anyway. So you don't have to look at this in a way that I failed, but then more so of applying and I'm slowly getting where I'm supposed to be at a point. So I hope this helps.
I would just briefly add, I think I wanted to mention this earlier. It's good at this point, when you're third year or graduating, separate, kind of move on from the uni mentality to like the work mentality. It's very different worlds. Uni is, you go to a lecture, you make a good decision, you write notes, you practice for the exam, you attend the exam, you do well on the exam, you get like a score at the end, right? The score is very much correlated with how much time you spend studying for the exam. Whereas in the real world, oftentimes, there is no direct feedback or correlation between the decisions you make and the outcomes that follow. For example, when you apply for jobs, a lot of the times the decisions you've made, a great CV, perfect cover letter, perfect interview tests, interviews were amazing, but the outcome was not what you expected. You need to kind of remove that connection between decision and outcome that you were used to at uni. You need to change that kind of thinking about it when it comes to the real world. It exists, but in a very different way. Sometimes it kind of takes a year for the feedback to come back to you. Sometimes it takes a week, sometimes 2 weeks. Sometimes it just would never come back to you. So don't judge the quality of your decision, which might have been amazing, by just the quality of the outcome. Because a lot of the times the outcome will not even show. So that would just be an important thing that I think helped me. It took me 3 years to realize, but helped me kind of shift from like the uni mentality to the workplace mentality.
Yeah, and just one other thing I was just going to build onto that as well. I think definitely kind of that separating out the what you put into it versus the outcome, but also I think it's understanding who can help you. And I think for me, a big learning curve for me when I graduated, which I kind of felt like I wish I'd had that foresight of, is that it's not always just it depends on the size of business that you're going for ultimately, but it's not always the person who is signing off on the role or interviewing you who's going to be that person who's the final say. You've got all these people who are people advisors, these are talent acquisition specialists, these are people in-house and their sole responsibility is to make sure they're bringing in really high level, very well-equipped, well-experienced talent. So sometimes it is, and I wish I'd known this because I've had conversations like this fairly recently, even, having, reaching out to a people advisor at a company and saying, look, you know what, I'm open to having a conversation, I've seen this a few roles, I just kind of want to see if you feel like there's maybe a good fit for me. And if there is, let me know, or if there's not, is there something that I can do? And that's not going to be the person who signs off on the role, that's not going to be the person who's the team lead, that's not the person who says yes or no to the final interview. That these are people whose sole responsibility is to make sure that they bring in really high quality, experienced people. And it's much easier to have that conversation with them and be candid and be honest. You're not trying to prove yourself to them, you're not trying to make a business case, you're ultimately just someone who is interested in joining them, they're interested in bringing people on, and so it really marries up that you both have an equal need that fits very well together. And it's just a whole new set of stakeholders that I definitely didn't fully consider. Because I just thought, well, I have to apply through these portals like everybody else does, and that's kind of the route you go through it. I have to try and make myself shine on paper, but it's not always as easy as that. So, yeah, I'd say look at who the stakeholders are that you can communicate with, because it may not always be who you think.
Sorry, I don't want to drag this on, but I think just one, I'll try to make it as quick as possible, which I think is very, very important when applying to roles, is that knowing that the hiring market right now is very different than how it was before the pandemic. There are hiring freezes, there are thousands of people who are being laid off who are applying for the same roles as you, who have 10 years plus experience, so don't take it directly to heart. At the moment, it is very tough. There is a lot of competition, so sometimes I think, which has been reflected in the panel, it's not a reflection on you or your experience. It's literally just the case that, that the hiring market at this moment is fluctuating a lot.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's another question over there from the audience.
Hi, Through my experience trying to apply for new jobs and stuff, especially with the lack of experience as a new graduate, I realised that I've had to gain different experience courses, but I've had difficulty knowing the legitimacy of the courses. So like I want to have an Excel course or maybe a computing course to get certificates, but I've realised it's quite hard to see which ones are worth the investment and which ones aren't, because it costs quite a lot of money to get additional courses. So I just wanted to know which platforms are the best, and also what courses can excel my likelihood of being employed. I know Excel is important for management roles and accounting roles, so I just wanted to know a bit more.
That's a really good question. I think, firstly, I think we earlier mentioned like LinkedIn Learning. That's a pretty decent place to start off, especially with it being free. Another place I highly recommend is Udemy. They never pay for the full price. That's the first advice actually. They always charge like £50 for a course, but 9 out of 10 times, 5 times out of the week, they're probably charging only £10 for it. So wait until there's a promotion before you buy a course on Udemy. Most times it is £10. And I think the best time is good to do all these courses. I do think it's nice to also then build, let's say, a portfolio on top of that. So let's say, for example, you use Excel, you learn an Excel course. That's good. Everyone can learn how to read it, can partake in an Excel course. Maybe with your new Excel skills, maybe build a dashboard on. We mentioned COVID a lot of times, so I might as well just use a COVID example. Build a COVID dashboard on sort of how many people are getting COVID in a week. So that's showing employees that you've learned a new skill like Excel, and you've basically applied what you've learned, and you've created examples of it. So I think with everything you do, like for example, with me a couple of years ago, I was learning software development. I mean, I did do a computer science degree, but I wanted to learn iOS, which wasn't taught at uni. I went away, done a Udemy course, and I sort of started building mobile applications on the side. So I was like, okay, so now I learned the things I needed to learn. Now I'm applying what I've learned, so then I can have an example. So in the interview, I don't have to only say, oh yeah, I've done some Udemy course where it was just in the background and I got here's a certificate, I completed it. It's more, hey, like I've done this course, I've applied it, and I've done it in current affairs. You can sort of link it to so many different things that you can say, hey, let's say you're interested in the finance industry, you can say, I built a Excel document that showed a balance record and it had all these fancy tools in it, blah, 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 and you can sort of use that to talk. So I definitely think, yeah, Udemy, LinkedIn Learning are the two best ones. Even YouTube. YouTube is really, that's what I'm going to mention YouTube. YouTube is really great. And you can use, I think YouTube is good with tutorials. So let's say, for example, you're stuck on something on YouTube, like maybe view lookups or something. You can go onto YouTube and watch a couple of videos on someone going through view lookup. And so yeah, I think those courses and applying what you've learned, because there's no point just learning things for the sake of learning it. If you don't really apply it, what's the point of learning this sort of thing? So yeah, I think that's it.
Just a couple to add to that as well. I think that's a really, really, really good point. LinkedIn Learning, I'm going to hammer home until pigs fly because it's so good. As a business, I think I speak for most employees now. I say a significant portion of our talent pipeline comes through LinkedIn. People with like a recruiter license with LinkedIn Pipeline Builder, that's where a significant portion of their leads come through. So LinkedIn Learning is a great way to have like a badge that expresses your skills and what you're able to do. So I say that's a really, really, really great place to start. Everything on LinkedIn Learning is accredited as well and vetted, which means you can speak to the validity of the learning that you're getting. Something else I always advocate for alongside Udemy is something called Coursera. Now, Coursera is a platform where institutionally accredited programs can be given. So I can take, for example, a module that is accredited by the University of Edinburgh, or the University of Westminster, or the University of West London. I know one of my colleagues has a course in brand strategy, which was a 4-month-long credit course from Harvard Business School. So Coursera is really great. You also get a badge to add to your LinkedIn profile to kind of express the fact that you've done it. So it's a really, really, really useful tool, and something I definitely recommend. And the only other thing that I recommend, and this is more kind of specific to the different jobs that it is that you're trying to do, but it depends on what programs you'll be using. So for example, we run media for the likes of Mars and Amex, etc. So Google run like ad certificates. to kind of showcase that you have those foundation pieces of knowledge from those kinds of softwares. And the same thing goes for a whole host of other tools. So 1, LinkedIn Learning Hammer at Home. 2, Coursera is really helpful, especially from like an accredited institution. But 3, what sort of softwares are you going to be using in that day-to-day? Because that's a really great resource to tap into, because I know Facebook have their own one, LinkedIn have their own one for Ads Manager, so do Twitter, so do Google for the likes of YouTube and Google Ads. So, yeah.
Sorry, this is the second time I've done this, sorry. I would just add one more, which is actually free through the university, is the AWS Skills Center. So basically they offer free courses all on like technology, whether it's machine learning, AI. So if you're interested in sort of upping your tech skills, definitely do sign up to that, look into the AWS Skills Center. Their qualifications that will be recognized everywhere in the world, so if they're free, they're definitely worth just sort of getting under your belt and putting under your IT skills.
And also Westminster gives alumni discount for short courses. So I know I actually used to work on the marketing team at the University of Westminster in my final year, and a load of my colleagues who were on the marketing team, marketing managers, campaign managers, these people end up booking on like professional short courses because you get a pretty hefty discount being alumni at Westminster, and it means you can get access to all the kinds of resources available and get those extra accreditations. So yeah, that's it. I promise that's it.
That's brilliant. Really good question. Some great content from the panel, and we will collate that as well. So you've got links to some of these resources, which I think will be really helpful. So thanks for all your input. There was one more question in the room that I think we've just about got time for. So if we've got the roving mic, we'll take that. I am aware there's some brilliant questions that have come through on Slido. So as I mentioned before, if you've got questions for individuals, grab them before they leave, do your networking. But if you've got questions that haven't been answered that are more about careers and employability, we will try and get some answers for you and share some resources and give you some more tips and things in the email that goes out. So that might take a little while to put together, but I hope that's okay with the alumni team. Brilliant. The final question was somewhere in the middle. Yeah, brilliant.
Hi everyone in the panel team. So I'm a first year undergraduate student. So right now I just have one question. That so there are like 4 months of summers coming up. I really don't know what to do in the summer. So can you just like help me with like what kind of internships I can apply for? Because I know like internships hiring process is done in September of last year. So I've kind of like missed my chance because I was like busy with my first year at uni and the freshers week and everything. So just like what can I do now, and how can I increase my skills as a first year student, and how should I prepare for my second year, because I know it's really more challenging and more difficult.
I'll say not all, depending on the size of the business that you're looking to go into. What is it you studied at university?
I studied business management marketing.
Business management marketing. Hey, that's my business schools. So I will say, depending on the size of the business, it can vary. I would say reach out to people and talent advisors for the businesses that you would like to go into. The reason I say that is because we've had a couple of interns who joined us a couple of summers ago. They were just putting cold emails out, messages out to the HR people at different agencies to kind of, just to see where they could spend their time in the summer. They were really looking to kind of just be in the space, absorb the happenings of the wider business and see what those things are going on. But also use Westminster as a great example and great resource for you to pull from. The reason I say that is because I signed up to Talent Bank, as I think most of us did, just because a university itself is a huge business. They have loads of things they've been doing. And I ended up getting to work on some of their clearing campaigns. We got to bring in virtual reality headsets for their open days to take people to accommodation. It was hosted by some DJ from BBC Radio 1. So I'd say tap into those resources at university. What can you do here? Because it's a great experience for you. The two people and talent advisors, because it's not always going to be formalised. There may be space for people that may have capacity to teach and learn.
And what should I do to prepare for my second year of uni?
To prepare for second year, I tell you what, just brush up on first year. Something that was a big shocker for me is that, when, it's always a bit of a surprise when you think, first year maybe doesn't necessarily, my grades in first year don't contribute to my overarching my grade of university. But ultimately, someone said a very sobering comment which is in second year, hey, we're going to take the time to go over anything you did in first year, so you better make sure you have all this stuff handy and ready to go. Which I think is really important, and also it makes you feel more confident that you're going in well equipped. I always feel like we're never quite sure whether we've got everything that we need to, but I think you'll know better than anyone how confident you feel going into something. If you don't quite feel just there yet, speak to people around you and do everything you can to get there.
Do you want to apply for kind of jobs?
Well, I haven't applied to any internships right now, but I did act as a student at the Alumni in the university. So I was just getting used to everyone, all the freshmen who can come probably this year. And nothing else happened yet. I don't know any other jobs right now.
Is there anything anyone wants to add to that question?
I would just add Bright Network again, which I mentioned earlier. They do so many different online internships and they accept loads of people. So if you are looking to get some business management experience, I'm pretty sure they have a vertical within Bright Network that is specific to that, and it's only 3 days. So that's just a great way of just getting some experience under your belt. In relation to your second question about preparing for second year, for me, I found that trying my best in my first year and working as hard as I could prepared me for my second year, because it was like a jump off a cliff for me personally. So I definitely feel like if you keep working at your best standard, then you will continue that through your second and your third year. Definitely it depends. So some people might disagree, but I would say work to get the best grade you want, not the grade that's going to pass. Because then when you get to your second and third year, you will already have built up the momentum of working hard and being 100% into each of your modules. So that will definitely help you with preparing for what's to come.
There are, what I will say is, I'll catch up with you after, because I think there's a couple of agency traineeships that I can point in the direction of that do 12-week summer placements across a variety of different sectors. So yeah, I'll chat to you about that.
Brilliant. Thank you for that question. Networking in action. So that's the end of the final What It Takes of this particular series of this academic year. I'd like to thank everybody here for all of your questions. Just a reminder, in terms of those of you who've got career-related questions, the University Career Service is here throughout the year. We're open during the vacation. You can speak to someone and get support during the vacation. We have appointments throughout the year. And for those of you who are graduates, we still have support. And these leaflets are at the back as well. There are surveys on your chairs. Please do take the time to fill them in because they're really important. We love getting your feedback and want to know what you want and what we should be covering in these sessions. But I think most importantly, I can't thank the panel enough for such brilliant, receptive answers to the questions that have been put to them by you and from our team. And being so open and generous with their time. Their advice is superb, and I hope you will continue to ask them questions throughout the rest of this evening. So thank you very much for coming. So please take the time to get some refreshments and network.